Welcome everybody to the Fantasy Golf Insider Webcast. I'm Jeff Bergerson, joined as always by my partner, Zach Turcotte. We are with FantasyGolfInsider.com, where you can join us and become a premium member and get access to some of the best daily fantasy golf information in the industry. I heard a little rumor that there's $1 million up for grabs this week, Zachary. Is that true?
Maybe for somebody. Maybe. I mean, it's 200,000 people. It might be, you might see 20 of the same team win. So it may be just a 50,000 there for a contest. Right. So yeah, it should be exciting. Last time it took a pretty wild and crazy roster. Somebody had to throw Troy Merritt on there to make themselves unique enough to take it down. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping it's a individual team that wins it and not a tie for it with 10 other teams.
Yep. So. Well, we've played in a lot of these Millionaire Makers, so we talk about strategy a lot, and it takes a certain strategy for you to give yourself a chance to win these Millionaire Maker events. So you'll talk about that in your daily spin, I'm sure, as we often do on the website. So be sure to join us. This broadcast is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can check us out there as well. Be sure to give us a good review, 5 stars, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. We would appreciate that. Before we recap the FedEx St. Jude, Zachary, we got some shout-outs to give to premium members this week who did well. The first one is Andrew Rust, who tweeted us and said he cleaned up in European Tour action this week, which is awesome.
That's amazing, because that was not an easy event.
It was a very tough event. So
big shout out to Perry for making some quality picks on that.
Absolutely. If you haven't signed up for our European Tour premium package, be sure to do so. Perry writes our European Tour preview and did an awesome job last week. So you can upgrade your package if you're currently a member to the Euro Tour.
Better give David a shout too. I know he'll get upset if we don't credit
David,
his model
you do good too. Yeah, absolutely. Also, Devin Custodio did well. I heard from him. And then Charlie Waters, whose Twitter handle is Austin R. Lacey. His DraftKings name is Kaiser Soze 199. Took 4th place in the $33 dog leg last week for a $10,000 win.
Nice.
So that is huge. Congratulations. Good work, man. Keep it up. Let's recap the FedEx St. Jude Classic last week, Zachary. Daniel Berger gets his much-awaited victory.
Yeah, he looked great.
He did.
And we were all over him. I had him for 25% buy last week, so that was exciting. So 2 weeks in a row, we had McGirt the week before and kind of my secondary tier, and then last week with Berger. So that's exciting. That's been good. That helped key up quite a few cashes in terms of GPPs for the week. Obviously, having the winner jumps all of your teams up enormously in the standings. So that was really nice. We had a lot of guys that were near the top as well. We had just had a handful of disappointments as well.
Wilkinson was awful.
That really hurt the core.
Yeah.
Everybody else was okay, at least in the core. Wilkinson, he was right there. He was even par with 3 holes to play, bogeyed 2 of the last 3, including the last hole. And it was just, what was devastating about it was it looked to me like it was definitely moving towards +2 all afternoon. I mean, when I first looked late morning, there were about 81 guys at +1 or better, but it was trending towards 2. So you'd look and then be 77, 75, 73, 70, and then there were 66 guys at 1 or better. So I thought, oh, great, now the cut has moved to +2. It's the end of the day. It's like 95 degrees out there, so the greens have got to be rock hard at this point. And then all of a sudden, the last hour of the day, everybody went on a scoring binge, just one birdie after another, and it went back to 1 pretty easily. There wasn't even a whole lot of drama there at the end. I think it was 72 or 73 guys ended up being 1 or better for the event. So that definitely hurt a little bit. Took out Jason Bone and it took out Tim Wilkinson, both guys who had ample opportunities to make it through, but didn't make it. But overall, we had enough guys that were in that top 10 range that it did keep us fighting above the break-even level for the week. I was real happy with the fact that once again we had 2 of our 3 optimal rosters make it through for cash games and wins. So that's
huge.
We're coming on 3 or 4 weeks in a row where we've been on the plus side of that. So I feel like we're starting to build some momentum since we've been going with the 3 optimal lineup approach, because
absolutely.
I mean you have to play, especially this year.
Yep.
If you're just playing one cash game, it's gonna be volatile.
Yeah, we
week to
talk
week.
about that a lot, though, and that's why we do 3 cash games. And people who have listened to that strategy have done well. I hear from them every week. So.
Yeah, and so that was great. So we're building some momentum in the cash game side. So, overall, a pretty good week. I was a little bit profitable. Probably made about 15% or so profits. Nothing terribly exciting.
Yeah.
It was, again, just one player. If Wilkinson makes the cut, that would lead to quite a bit more in terms of cash for us. But, overall, take a profitable week at a tournament like St. Jude, where it seemed like half the field that we were interested in dropped out and withdrew leading up to the event.
My core didn't do so well. I was not profitable.
You were not
Well,
quite.
Gary Woodland outed. I just felt like he was really primed to have a good result last week. Really great form coming in. Now he gets a weaker field to kind of have his chance to shine.
Of course.
Has everything to play for.
And he needed to take 7th or better in the event. And we're going to think about this right here, because this narrative will come back again around the FedEx Cup.
Yep.
We'll be looking at the guys right around that 125 line
Who need it. Yep.
And the whole week we'll hear people say, well, this guy needs to do this, and these guys are going to play well because they have incentive to play well. Well, that was just blown out of the water.
Ryan Palmer?
By Ryan Palmer and Gary Woodland
I had a lot
the
of
first
Palmer
day.
as well, so that hurt as well.
Yeah, I had a little bit of each there in the tertiary group of guys. I had about 15% on each of them, which was pretty disappointing. I actually had a 300 lineup where I stacked Berger, Palmer, and Woodland together, and what could have been, right, if they just play their normal game.
Yep.
I mean, it was a little bit unfortunate with those guys, because Woodland had been so consistent all year. It felt like he was just building towards that.
Yeah.
And then and then all of a sudden Thursday rolled around. It looked like he was just building towards a 2-week vacation.
He was just awful. He was never in it.
Not at one point. There was absolutely no shot. So it was a little bit frustrating.
So that was the FedEx St. Jude kind of leading into the U.S. Open this week. Should we do our shot of the week before we dive into the U.S. Open?
Absolutely.
All right. So every Friday, I mean, all of you guys know what kind of roller coaster we ride on Friday afternoons for the cut line sweat. And it just seems like the guys that I have seem to always give me hope and then squash my dreams.
Yeah.
So that guy this week was Jason Gore. I didn't have a lot of them. I just had a tiny bit of them.
He's 5,900, so
I knew. I threw him on a couple lineups. But it was so typical. He comes out, so he's -1 after the first round, right? And then he comes out on Friday. He goes bogey, bogey, bogey on the 5th, 7th, and 10th holes, and then doubles on the 12th. So right there, I'm thinking, oh, well, that was it. That was a fun ride. He's done.
Dead.
Yep. And then he's inspired on the 15th, 16th, and 17th hole. He goes birdie, birdie, birdie miraculously.
One of them was like a lengthy chip in, too, from off the green. So it looked like we're just getting this miracle.
Right. Your hopes come and you're like, oh, wow, this could actually happen.
3
All he
straight
needs
birdies,
to do,
bonus points, everything is going our way.
just need a par 18.
Yep.
And...
Right, yeah. I was refreshing, and I didn't even see it. On my phone, it went from shot from the fairway to 5. Shot 5 in the hole. I thought, what happened? Then I looked, and it's worse because I don't want to just see the bogey. I want to see how it went down.
I know.
He must have hit his fairway shot, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and then had to chip on and missed a long putt. But that wasn't what happened. He ended up missing a 3-foot, 11-inch putt on 18 for his tournament life.
Yeah, that's insane.
Which was awful. It had destroyed one of my $300 teams for the last week. So, yeah, I was feeling some pain on that. It's worse when they get that close.
I know.
Just don't even hit the other 3.
No, that's what I was thinking. Just stay there, keep doubling out, and I can just not even look at you anymore.
Yeah,
but no.
that much worse.
Yeah. So Jason Gore and all the other guys that squash your dreams on Friday. Yeah. On to the U.S. Open this week.
Wacky wagers.
Oh, Wacky Wagers. Talk about Wacky Wagers.
We had a very prominent guest take part this last week in the Wacky Wagers. We finally were able to corner Tommy G, and it's been kind of a long time coming, but I hadn't gotten anything locked down when he hit me up for a couple of lineup pointers late night on Wednesday. I thought, oh, here's a good time. We'll get Tommy G on board. We couldn't think of actual wager right on the spot. But when it's Tommy G, you know you're going to get something crazy out of it.
Right.
So we came up with something creative. He's going to have to get for us from the FSTA this week out in New York City. We think there's probably about a 75% chance that he'll forget about it while he's out there. But hopefully he will remember, because I did beat him this last week, so I moved to 15-10 on the season for Wacky Wagers. And hopefully we'll get that very creative prize from Tommy within the next couple of weeks.
Cool.
So, yeah.
We should have some good offers this week for the U.S. Open.
I'm hoping so. Hopefully people step it up and see. We got to see who's going to be a part of the contest. Our Clint Eastwood painting friend, Bo Bowman, has already offered up a.
What?
He's already he's already put up a couple of ideas on things that he wants to add to the liquor collection for us. So,
nice.
So that'll just be a side one.
Oh,
but
okay.
I'm not going to pass that up, considering what he's offered on it. So he'll be out there.
Nice. That's awesome.
But he goes head to head against me almost every week. So that'll just be an additional one. But yeah, we've still got some good gear. We can always surprise some people with some additional stuff that we've still got laying around here. So put up some good stuff this week for a major, folks. Raise your game this week.
All right. That's all you got to say about that?
That's all I got.
All right. Oakmont Country Club is the host for this year's U.S. Open. Last played here in 2007.
Yeah.
And it was difficult then, and it's going to be difficult now.
Yeah, somebody hit you up on Twitter already and said you looked at the numbers from 2007 and even considered them for this tournament this week? How dare you?
I should just close my eyes and throw darts, I guess.
Said, well, you could just take a little look. We didn't say it was all or nothing, and I'm not saying you go and rewatch the 2007 tournament in its entirety.
Load up on Cabrera this week.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? Check it out. You can just see how the course played, how certain players. I mean, it's going to give you just a little bit of an idea.
Yeah, and I think tournament history, even though the courses obviously rotate every year, I think you can still take something out of tournament history. All U.S. Open style courses play very difficult. They're the most difficult courses that guys play all year long. They have the thickest rough, the fastest greens. So it's good to see who responds well to those types of playing conditions and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's quite evident when you look at the tournament history. So even though it's on the same course, I still like to look at it. Oakmont itself is not a super long course. It's 7,254 yards. It is a par 70. They have some long par 4s, obviously. This is the 9th time Oakmont has hosted the U.S. Open. Like I said, it's going to be thick rough. I'm already seeing players tweet how thick it is and drop their balls in the rough and you can't see it and everything.
That's interesting. Before we get too far in that, that's interesting because I see some quotes and things from players, and every time I see something that is ultra negative from a guy, like last week, I think Phil Mickelson said this will be the hardest course we ever play on it. I almost went to my list and just said, all right, Phil, you're gone. Insta fade.
Well, especially Bubba, when he thinks something's difficult, he'll start pissing and moaning about it.
That makes me
not too tough.
That makes me not want to own the guys. It feels like they've already making an excuse for when things don't go very well for them. They've already kind of checked out just a little bit mentally. So kind of watch that on Twitter this week for guys who get a little bit too intimidated for the course.
Right. Yep. They're expecting, last time it was here, the winning score was +5, so they're expecting the winning score to be above par.
They take a lot of pride in that, too.
I know they do.
See if we can just push
I kind of like it,
up.
though. Yeah. I mean, it's frustrating at points, but I like seeing these guys struggle, maybe not to the point that it sometimes gets, but we need to take this into consideration on DraftKings this week and for the Millionaire Maker event, because there isn't going to be a lot of hole-to-hole scoring. There aren't going to be a lot of birdies, virtually no eagles. So a high percentage of the points scored are going to be place points, right? Definitely. So I think they ran a simulation. I saw Fantasy Golf Metrics, I think, ran it. They said if in 2007 the winning score on DraftKings would have been like 80 points or something. Okay. So if you consider that 30 points is because of first place, that's almost half of the points coming from place points. So keep that in mind that we're looking for guys who are going to finish high, especially maybe not so much the volatile players that we sometimes do who can birdie the hell out of courses, because they're not going to do it this week.
Yeah, you're just looking for guys who can save par.
That's right.
Most part.
Yep, we're looking for a different type of player. So expect the DK points to be way down this week.
Just like they were last year.
Just like they were at Chambers Bay last year. Yep. So key stats this week, strokes gained tee to green. Strokes gained putting is I think big. Some people kind of discount it.
Debate on that this week,
yeah.
And I know you have got some different thoughts on it. And I guess I was kind of thinking through it in my head. It's going to neutralize the scoring for sure. So guys are not going to be drilling 25 or 20-foot birdie putts. That the percentage is going to go down. But I think when we were discussing earlier before the show is where it's still going to stand out is those 4 and 5 foot putts are still going to be really tough. And if you're a poor putter, those are still going to be really tough putts to make. And so guys, their range is going to be tighter, but the good putters are still going to have a bigger range for saving par than those not so good putters that are out there. So I think it still is going to make a difference. Obviously, leg putting will be bigger, but that's a part of the whole process as well. It's, who can take a 30-footer and make it a 2-footer as opposed to a 7-footer or an 8-footer. So I think it definitely will still be weighted in there, and I do think that the elite putters will still have some advantage this week.
I think so too. Birdies are better percentage. Also bogey avoidance.
Bogey avoidance.
Like you said earlier, it's the guys who can avoid the triples, because if you put up a triple, it's hard for you to respond with a few straight birdies to get you back to even. So you got to avoid the triples.
So the guys who can scramble then.
That's right. Scramblers too. Driving accuracy. You got to stay out of the thick rough.
The 6-inch rough or whatever they're saying now. Exactly. I'm sure tomorrow it'll be 8 inches and 10 inches by 30. I mean, they're just blowing this up every day.
I know. So that's what I got for key stats this week. Be sure to check out our model. It's up now. It's been up since this weekend. Eric did a nice job getting that up early.
Good job,
for you folks. Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate that. So it's pretty interesting when you take a look at some of the outstanding values. Part of that's because the pricing's soft. Part of that's because public perception influences the odds in these things as well.
Sure.
And also and the prices were posted prior to the FedEx St. Jude. So there's a couple guys who finished well there that aren't accounted for. So why don't we break down the pricing? Do you want to start at the top, or would you like to start at the
I'll start at the top.
All right, start at the top, sir.
Well, it's going to be a decision here. It's real tricky with these Millionaire Makers. This is typically where everybody goes after the Millionaire Makers. So if they're going to play it, they're going to play 20 teams, 30 teams. They're going to put all these extra teams out there for the Millionaire Maker. And I think the mistake people make with this is they look at the top players and they say, I'm going to own a little bit of this guy and a little bit of this guy.
Right.
So they own a little bit of 6 or 7 different guys, and in doing so, they give themselves a very small chance to succeed.
Yeah.
Last year, if you look at it, if you put in 50 Millionaire Maker teams, but you only had Spieth on like 5 of them, well, then your chances of winning then were down to 1/10 of what your entries were for the week. So typically what I do, and it's aggressive style of play, is to make the commitment to 1 or 2 top guys. And that's what you're going to kind of have to do if you're going to build a dozen or a couple dozen of these Millionaire Maker rosters. Is if you don't do that, you're just hoping that the 1 or 2 teams that look good with that first place winner, everybody else was perfect on there. And that's hardly ever the case. So commit to it, so that if you do happen to hit the winner on 50% of your teams, now you've got 10, 15 teams.
A lot of different chances,
And you got a lot of different parts that can move up or down, and you don't have to depend on that bottom guy to get through or do something that final day. So make a commitment to just a handful of guys, and it's going to come down to, I think, which of the top 3 guys you go in on, if you're going to go in on one of those top 3. And then, do you work with that second tier at all, or are you going to go with a more balanced approach? Typically, we haven't seen the balanced approach work very well, because we've seen elite players, at least over the last
and in major tournaments, the elite players always
over the last couple of years. It's been quite a while since we've had somebody pop out of nowhere in the fantasy golf era and win one of these things. So in looking up at the top, Jason Day, I think that's the first big burning question that people are going to have. What say you on Jason Day this week? Will you be owning him?
Yes, I will own Jason Day.
Okay.
Despite the fact that I think he is going to be one of the heaviest owned guys this week, because obviously he's the hottest player in the world. But also because the pricing is so soft, he's very rosterable. You can put the top price guy and still have a really solid team around him.
For sure.
So if I'm making a choice, and I've tried building different teams with a couple of different studs, like I went Day, Spieth, Day, DJ, and I'm not comfortable with the other 4 guys.
It's not good.
No, it's not good. And we need guys in the top 15 if we're going to win the $1 million. Right. And I don't see the 4 guys that down are in the range that you have to be.
It could happen. The tough part is
of course it could happen.
Predicting those guys.
Exactly.
And it gets back to what we were saying before. Okay, so you're going to stack those top 2 guys.
Yeah.
Then what you're going to have to do is just over and over and over pick different combinations of those bottom 4 and hope that one of them kind of unlocks everything for you.
So I have the choice. Do I want Jason Day or do I want Dustin Johnson? And I like Jason Day the best out of that top range. I just think his game is great right now. He's a great putter. He's just great all-around game. So if I have to make a choice up top, it's going to be him.
And it's kind of nice that he didn't finish so well the other week. He fell back a little bit, so everybody's already thinking, oh, well, he finished back. And they just saw DJ finish up near the top yet again, so that's still fresh in their minds.
Well, I think DJ's ownership will be somewhat close to Jason Day's.
Yeah.
There's a lot of buzz in the industry. Most of the people that I've read and listened to like DJ, so I think his ownership could be 25%.
I think they could be almost the same.
Yeah.
I think they could be very, very close. It does tend to be pretty well dispersed with a 200,000 entry field.
Yeah.
You don't get the big disparity because in the 300 week to week, you can see a lot of interesting movement just based on momentum of a few people getting excited about a player. It does tend to be a little more evenly dispersed, but I think with all the buzz on DJ and the fact that he has yet to miss a cut this season, and he's finishing one top 10 after another.
Yep.
But again, like you said, what does DJ not do very well? He doesn't close on Sundays.
He doesn't close, and he gets into severe trouble that he usually birdies his way out of.
Yeah, and that's the thing with if the course is as tough as advertised. Now, last year was tough, but if we're talking about last year where Spieth won, I think it was -5.
Right.
And we're saying this year that the score might be +3 to +5 range. DJ can be kind of a blow-up artist, as we've seen, where momentum carries from one hole to the next, and then 3 holes he's picked up 4 or 5 strokes, which very easily could be the case here. So if he gets out of it, he will have a very hard time playing his way back into contention here. So I would say that, Day is the favorable option just because his putting has been so tremendous. But, if you look down just a little bit, I think there's going to be an opportunity there with either Spieth or with Rory.
Right.
And typically it's been Spieth. It was at the Masters. I mean, we've seen
every major tournament.
He has tended to be under-owned, and in talking with some folks, I mean, you just fade him at your own peril because he shows up one major after another. And he hasn't been scoring as much lately, but he is still, in terms of being able to save par, he's definitely one of the top guys out there. So you just feel a certain level of comfort with knowing that if you want to have somebody over the ball, him or Day, in terms of their putting, are probably the guys. So I think I will probably own a smaller amount of Day and probably a little more of Spieth this week, just because I think there is still that opportunity out there. So, those are kind of the top 4 players. Is there anybody else above 10,000 that you're going to be taking a look at this week?
I might have a sprinkling of Justin Rose and Ricky Fowler just to be completely contrarian, because I don't think many people are going to own Justin Rose this week. Coming off the injury issue, everyone's scared. But, if he's playing, I'm guessing he got cleared to play. He's feeling good. He's been focused on this tournament.
And the thing is, when he skipped the last event due to injury, a lot of that could have just been with the focus of playing in the U.S. Open.
To make absolute sure he's perfect.
So it could have been just a very minor type of it. You don't know with golf, because that stuff changes all the time.
Yeah, and they won't ever release the fact.
Right, but it could have been just very minor. And then he's coming into the U.S. Open, he feels fresh, and he feels healthy. And then obviously, Ricky as well, having just been really erratic.
Yeah.
He looks dominant at the beginning of the season. He was putting together a lot of top 10s. Now he's missed a couple of cuts.
But like I mentioned, I talked on the Pat Mayo Millionaire Maker special, I talked about Ricky's wins.
They're always after people count him out.
They are. He won after a miscut at Deutsche Bank. The Scottish Open, he won after he looked awful at the U.S. Open last year, the next event. At the Players, he had missed the cut at the Zurich a couple weeks prior to that. So he's a guy who doesn't necessarily need to be great coming in.
That's what fires him up. Once he sees he's been written off, then
he just catches fire. And he's a guy who hasn't been putting well. but he can putt well.
You know, we haven't heard much about it all in that lower range. Just kind of rounded out a little bit. Is Adam Scott?
Yeah, right.
Do you have any faith in him at all? I mean, he started the year so hot, so good, and then immediately just kind of disappeared. We haven't really seen much of him.
No buzz in the industry.
Zero buzz this week. Zero buzz this week. And it's not. I mean, and these are the kind of things that I think about as I go through. Because I'm looking through the order of how guys are going to be owned from top to bottom.
Yep.
And I'm seeing Ricky. I'm seeing Rose. I'm seeing Scott. Nobody mentioning them at all. So something to consider this week. I'm still kind of evaluating, how I feel about each of those players this week, but definitely something to consider when thinking about a contrarian roster. And guys, Scott's definitely got a chance.
All three of those guys got a legit chance to win the U.S. Open. There's no question.
I mean, the tee to green game for Adam Scott is about as good as there is out there. Obviously, he has not been a great putter. It feels like his putting had improved and then is started to regress again, which is a little bit frustrating, but it also could be an opportunity, as it was last year at the Open where people wrote him off completely, and there he was on the last day kind of competing for it. I think dropping down a little bit, the guy that I will be looking at 9,800 is Hideki Matsuyama.
Okay.
Obviously an enormous disappointment. For me personally, as well as fantasy golf enthusiasts,
personally,
all over the globe. He was terrible just a couple of weeks back, which I always feel like is a great opportunity to just jump right back on.
Right.
One of the best ball strikers out there. Every aspect of the game is rock solid, and he does tend to play pretty well at the majors. The obvious drawback with Hideki is he doesn't tend to putt very well. But again, in a tee to green game as elite as his is, and he's a good proximity player. What I am always driven crazy by when I watch Hideki Matsuyama at an event, Hideki from the fairway hits his approach shot, and then you see him just turn around in frustration, swing at the ground,
one-handed club. I mean, he brings one hand off the club more than anybody else.
Right,
he's pissed off,
he's shaking his head,
and you're just like, oh,
the ball lands 15 feet from the cup. What was that? You're just outraged by that?
Right.
So he's definitely going to be in there, and he's going to be in there fighting. I like him at 9,800. You can stack him with one of those other top guys, which I will be doing a lot of this week. So that's the other guy in kind of that top range that I definitely will be looking at to kind of round out the guys that I'm considering.
The guy who I like most is at 8,700, and that's Brandon Grace. Sure. I'm a little bit upset that a lot of other people in the industry are liking him as well.
Right.
I know Pat Mayo is high on him as well, which
wrecked it again, Pat.
which will bring up his ownership. Now I'm guessing he might be owned by close to 20%, which is crazy. But I still like him. I think everything lines up for him to compete well this week. Matt Kuchar at 8,500 is pretty tough to ignore. He looks to be like one of the best values overall this week. So I'll probably be rostering Kuchar, although there is a bit of a fade opportunity there as well, because I think his ownership could be
through the roof.
25%
it'll be very,
as well.
very high with what he's done lately.
Just so cheap. And he plays well in U.S. Opens. Another couple of guys who I like down in that range, Patrick Reed at 8,400, and then Brooks Koepka at 8,100. I think since the pricing came out prior to the end of the St. Jude, I think we get a little bit of a price break on Brooks, so I think he looks like a good value there too.
Yeah,
What do you think?
Well, in dropping down, I feel like you just covered the 8,000 range.
I'm sorry.
For us for the most part. No, I'll go back up a little bit. There is one other guy, and hopefully other people forget about him too, but Sergio Garcia. Coming off of a win just a few weeks ago, he's going to be a guy here. I think people are going to overlook him a little bit just because he doesn't play that much this season, but he's had a couple decent results now. Early on in the year, I wasn't a big fan of some of the things I saw in terms of his body language when I saw him at Northern Trust, and he wasn't playing much in the wintertime. But he's looking pretty good lately, and he tends to be one of those guys. As we've said, he's not usually going to win the event for you. I wouldn't anticipate him winning this week. I think he's definitely a guy who could contend, and I think that is a range that might be a little overlooked. I think that mid 9,000 to high 8,000 range will end up getting overlooked this week. So I think there could be a little bit of an opportunity with Sergio dropping down into the 7,000s this week. I think there's a couple of guys there who do interest me. One of them is a favorite of yours from over the years, Martin Keimer. He's a guy who has won the U.S. Open. He's a guy who does play really well on tough courses, and he's a guy whose game has really picked up over the last couple of months. He's put together a number of top 10 finishes, and he's been so far off most DFS players' radar
for 2 years
over the last couple of months. He's typically owned by only about like 5 or 6% of the field.
Yep.
I think there's a great chance this week to roster him and have fairly limited ownership.
I think I think probably 6-7%.
That's about as high as ever own him, and his price at $7,600. That's not going to attract too much attention. If he were down below that, I think people might start to notice a little bit. I think it's $7,600. Pretty good opportunity there. Charles Schwartzel dropping down to $7,500. He was a great value just a couple weeks ago at $8,000. Played really well, and now his price comes down again.
That's a crazy low price, which is going to push his ownership up to
I think
maybe close to 20%.
15 to 20% range probably. He'll be a guy who is anchored in that value range for
especially
a lot of folks.
If you roster one of the studs, then you're automatically down in that low 7, mid 7
right.
range.
You go 12,000, and you're at like 75,
right.
$7,600 for your average salary per player. So he'll be a guy who a lot of people own. Daniel Berger, obviously, at $7,300 this week, or $7,200 or $7,300 in that range. He comes off of a win. He's had an exceptional season. He has been really a model of consistency in terms of making the cut so far this year. Hasn't been doing the make one, miss one game that he did last summer. So, maybe either he got some distance from his girlfriend or things are really good with the girlfriend.
Speaking of, I tweeted this out last night. I'm like, I sat through a weather delay. I sifted through like 5 different channels as they bounce around coverage, waiting to see if I can get a glimpse of Daniel Berger's girlfriend run out to the green.
Wow, yeah.
And I didn't get 1 second of her.
That's a shame.
I was pissed off. I'm like, on MS, NBC, whatever the hell that is. I had to look up what channel that is. And no Berger's girlfriend. So I was quite upset by that.
Well, it's good. Maybe he told her, stay back. Stay back. Don't bring your black,
don't travel with her.
Don't bring your black magic around me, sweetie pie. So I think he'll definitely be a guy who's owned pretty heavily this week, and one that a lot of folks will definitely be building some rosters around.
I will say there's a couple other guys in that mid-value range that we're not going to mention that are on the model that popped up that look like supreme values this week, but we'll keep that for our premium members. We can drop down in the 7s and maybe a couple in the 6s, and then you can talk about the rest of the sleepers in the daily spin.
One guy who does interest me a little bit, who I've seen some signs of life at 7,000, and I'd kind of written him off a month or two ago.
Oh, are you going to say Webb Simpson?
Whew, you read my mind. Webb Simpson, you're right there.
That's crazy.
It's funny how you could figure that out.
Looking for good putters.
But he's done kind of a weird thing with his putting grip. So he changed his grip.
Yep.
It seems to be working. And whatever it did, it's changed his confidence. So he's definitely feeling a lot more confident out there. But if you're looking for ball strikers, Webb is about as good as they get. He is probably just a step below a guy like Hideki out there in terms of his ball striking. But if his game is on, and he's keeping the ball in the fairway, and then he's hitting greens,
right.
Yeah, he's not going to be a fantastic putter, but if he's able to stay out of trouble a little more than some of the other guys that are out there, I think I'll probably own a little bit of Webb this week. I'm not gonna jump in for 25%, but I can see a 5% hedge or 10% hedge on Webb at 7,000 as one little below the radar type of name. And then down in the 6,000s, this is kind of the range that gets interesting because you're going to start to see a ton of really talented European players in that 6,000 range, and there's always going to be 2 or 3 of these guys that jump up and have a very high potential to be on some winning millionaire rosters. So out of the 6,000 guys, is there anybody in particular on the European side at least that you love this week?
Well, maybe not the European side, but he's played a lot of PGA events, and that's Anirban Lahiri all the way down at 6,100. We've seen more of him this year than we ever have, but he's made 6 straight cuts. Took a T6 at Dean and DeLuca, so he does have some upside. Most of his finishes come in the 40s, but he was an elite putter on the European Tour. Hasn't putted all that well on the PGA Tour. I don't know why that doesn't translate, but we're back on. It's more of a European-style course this week. It's kind of a link-style course, so I kind of like Lahiri this week at 6,100.
And
he's going to be owned by about 5% of the field. So.
Yeah, definitely. He's never a popular name. Even after a great performance, people still kind of, whatever. It's just Lahiri. I don't know what it is. Maybe just the personality doesn't leap out enough for folks.
Another guy at 6,500 is Affie Barnrat.
Yeah.
obviously he can pop up too in a major event. So. Yep.
Yeah, definitely a couple of those guys that are in there. I think Chris Wood is one at 6,600 who's been playing exceptionally well over in Europe. He was here for the Masters. It doesn't tend to play a lot over in the U.S., but he's been playing great on the European side. Won just 2 weeks ago.
He did. Yep.
So definitely a guy who's in form right now, and at 6,600, I think he could do well. A guy who's had a great season, who looked great at the Masters, was Soren Kjeldsen.
Right.
He's at 6,400 this week. Obviously, things translate pretty well for him this year. It's kind of the second year we've seen a bit of him. He played over here in the U.S. in a few events. Didn't have tremendous success. Did pretty well at the WGC Bridgestone event last year, but really didn't do much in the major events that he played in. But then came over. It was very impressive at the Masters. Yeah. So I like him there at 6,400. And then Chris Kirk at 6,600 too. Guy who's just been trending upward in the right direction all season. Seems to be recovered from the wrist. Hits a lot of different statistical categories that we'll be looking at this week. Can be a little bit erratic if he doesn't get off to a good start in some of these events, but at 6,600, I think there's a ton of value there, top 10 potential kind of guy. So those are all guys that I'm looking at this week within that range.
So be sure to check out the daily spin that Zachary writes every week. Look at the tournament history, the odds versus sportsbook pricing, or the sportsbook odds versus the pricing. Also our model. Email us at info@fantasygolfinsider.com if you have any lineup building questions or anything for the Millionaire Maker this week. On Twitter, we're at Fantasy Golfers. Zachary will do Periscope on Wednesday night, so be sure to check that out.
Free Periscope, right?
Free Periscope. You're not going to collect tips this week?
No tips.
So high class.
Yeah.
So good luck, everybody, this week at the U.S. Open. Be sure to let us know how you're doing. If you have any Sunday shot at the $1 million, we'd like to hear from you so we can send good karma your way.
If somebody wins $1 million, we'll even send them a t-shirt.
They will. Yeah, we will. So good luck, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.
Good luck.